Trump is about to declare victory on Iran, and if you read the actual terms of what he's agreeing to, you'll understand why members of his own party are calling it a catastrophe. Let's be precise about what's happening. On Saturday, Trump announced that a deal with Iran had largely been negotiated, and that the Strait of Hormuz would be reopened. By Sunday morning, Axios had the internal details: a 60-day ceasefire extension, Iran gets to freely sell oil again, some sanctions get lifted through negotiations, and here's the part that nobody in the celebratory coverage wants to lead with: the nuclear program question gets handed off to future talks. 60 days. That's what this is, a 60-day pause, not dismantlement, not a permanent agreement. A temporary ceasefire with a verbal commitment from Iran to discuss a moratorium on uranium enrichment at a later date. AP's reporting Sunday morning is damning in its specificity. Regional officials told their correspondents that Iran has not publicly committed to giving up its uranium stockpile at all, a point Haaretz confirmed, noting that Iran insists its highly enriched uranium is not part of the current agreement. Where Secretary Rubio happened to be standing when he declared progress, responded to a statement on social media saying Tehran has an inalienable right to nuclear technology. Rubio himself, speaking to the New York Times, said nuclear matters are highly technical and you can't resolve them in 72 hours on the back of a napkin. He's right, you can't. But that raises an obvious question. If you can't, then what exactly was this war for? Trump launched strikes on Iran in late February, citing fears Iran was on the verge of nuclear breakout. Over 200 Republican members of Congress signed a letter last year demanding any deal permanently dismantle Iran's enrichment capacity. Not pause it, not negotiate about it, dismantle it entirely. Senator Tom Cotton posted to X on Sunday that the U.S. should take out enough Iranian capability so it cannot threaten our allies in the region. Mike Johnson called it encouraging. Other senior Republicans called it a disaster. The party that supported the military action based on a promise of zero enrichment is now being handed a deal where the enrichment question is deferred, and Iran's position hasn't moved. Their supreme leader has said enrichment is the key to their nuclear program, and that external pressure on that point is existential. Axios reported that the main difficulty isn't technical, it's that Iran needs to figure out how to sell it domestically. In other words, the actual obstacle to a nuclear deal right now isn't verification mechanisms or inspections. It's Iranian national pride and internal politics. That's not a technical problem with a technical solution. That's a structural constraint that a 60-day pause doesn't touch. What Trump is about to announce is a pause dressed as peace. Brent crude will fall, the Dow will rally, and in 60 days, if Iran hasn't agreed to anything binding on enrichment, and there's no evidence they will, we'll be back at the same table having the same conversation. With oil prices intact, with the enrichment stockpile intact, and with a Trump administration that will have spent its political capital on a deal that accomplished a ceasefire it could have negotiated in March. While the Iran deal dominates the weekend headlines, there is a disease moving through Central Africa that is getting a fraction of the coverage it deserves. As of Friday, there are 836 suspected Ebola cases and at least 186 deaths across the DRC and Uganda. That number almost certainly understates reality. The WHO said explicitly at their May 20th briefing that given how long the virus was circulating before detection, they expect reported cases to keep climbing. The outbreak has already reached Bunia, Goma, Kinshasa, and Uganda's capital, Kampala. It is not in a forest, it is in cities, and yesterday, quietly, buried in an HHS interim final rule, the U.S. government extended its Title 42 entry restrictions to lawful permanent residents, people with legal status who pay taxes, who have homes in the United States, are now being denied re-entry if they've been in DRC, Uganda, or South Sudan in the past 21 days. The administration's public framing is that these are layered protection measures. The CDC describes them as proactive. What it does not tell you, and what ABC News reported Sunday, citing Dr. Kritika Kupali, an infectious disease specialist who has worked in outbreak settings, is that the WHO has long advised against exactly this type of broad travel restriction. Not because the optics are bad, because they don't work. When you ban people from declaring their travel history, they don't stop traveling. They rebook through third countries. They lie to airline agents. You lose your surveillance data precisely when you most need it. The 2014 Ebola response showed this. The early COVID travel bans showed this. The evidence base on this is not ambiguous. What makes this outbreak genuinely different from the ones we had tools for is this: the Bundibugyo virus. This is not the Zaire strain. The vaccines that were developed after 2014, RVSV Zebov, Ad26 Zebov, MVA-BN Philo, all target Zaire. They are not effective against Bundibugyo. There are no licensed therapeutics either. The case fatality rates in past Bundibugyo outbreaks have ranged from 30 to 50%. An American healthcare worker contracted it while treating patients in DRC and had to be evacuated to Germany for treatment because Germany has more experience managing Ebola patients. His high-risk contacts were also flown to Germany and the Czech Republic. The United States is closing its doors based on geography and immigration status, using a legal authority designed for immigration enforcement against an outbreak that experts say is best managed through surveillance and contact tracing. And the tool it's relying on, Title 42, has never been shown to contain Ebola. It was used during COVID, and the pandemic happened anyway. The administration is reaching for the politically legible response, not the epidemiologically sound one. And the gap between those two things is where outbreaks grow. And now something that isn't a crisis, not yet, but might be in 10 years. China launched the Shenzhou 23 spacecraft from the Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center. 3 astronauts, Commanders Zhu Yangzhu, Zhang Jiwan, and Lai Kai-ying, born in Hong Kong, and the first astronaut from the city on a space mission, are headed to the Tiangong space station, the Heavenly Palace. One of the 3 is set for a year-long stay in orbit. This is China's 40th crewed space mission, its 7th crew rotation at a fully operational station. It launches against the backdrop of a Chinese program explicitly targeting its first crewed lunar landing by 2030. The U.S. press coverage was polite and brief. AP filed a solid dispatch. Most outlets treated it as a pleasant science story. None of them said what's actually obvious. The United States does not have a domestic crewed space launch capability that operates on this schedule, at this reliability level, heading toward a station it fully controls. The International Space Station Partnership, the one that included Russia, Canada, Europe, and Japan, is winding down. Its planned decommission is 2030. The U.S. passed the Wolf Amendment in 2011 specifically to prevent any form of cooperation with China's space program, which means Tiangong is China's alone, and there is no joint future being built. NASA's Artemis program, the one meant to return Americans to the moon, has suffered delays measured in years, not months. Artemis 2, the crewed lunar flyby, has been pushed repeatedly. The Government Accountability Office found in its last assessment that Artemis faced ongoing schedule risks from the Space Launch System and the Orion spacecraft's life support systems. China, meanwhile, just launched its 40th crewed mission with mechanical regularity. One crew member is doing a year in space, accumulating the long-duration physiology data you need if you're serious about a lunar landing. They are not doing this for prestige. They are doing this because orbital infrastructure translates to lunar infrastructure, translates to who controls the next plateau of strategic reach beyond Earth. The Wolf Amendment made sense as Cold War logic applied to a new competition. Block cooperation, maintain information advantage. But what the last 15 years have shown is that exclusion does not slow China's space program. China built its own station, trained its own astronauts, developed its own rockets. The gap in capabilities that the Wolf Amendment was meant to preserve has closed, and in some operational dimensions, cadence, crew rotation reliability, long-duration habitability, closed entirely. Whether the United States is winning the space race right now depends entirely on how you measure it. China is winning. By operational stability, it's a tie at best. By trajectory toward the moon, the 2030 target China has stated publicly and is executing against. The U.S. has not named a competing date it has the budget and the hardware to meet. That story got about 4 paragraphs on a Sunday. Make of that what you will. 3 stories. A peace deal that defers the only question that started the war. A travel ban that experts say will backfire, applied to people who have legal permanent residence in this country. And a space launch the US covered politely, while the program executing it is 40 missions into a schedule that doesn't stop. What they have in common is performance over substance. A deal announced before the hard part is resolved. A ban imposed to demonstrate action rather than reduce transmission. A space story covered as novelty, while its strategic implication is treated as a future problem. Future problems have a way of arriving on schedule, even when the coverage doesn't.